Diane, great to have you with us. So why don't you give a little bit of background kind of about yourself?
Okay, yeah. My name's Diane Gehart, and I actually have my doctorate in the area of marriage and family therapy. It's kind of a specialized doctorate.
Yeah,
And I've been a professor for 27 years,
yeah.
and I've written about 14 books in the field. And right now I'm running a training institute for therapists. It's kind of, yeah, what my focus is right now. And I have a small private practice in Newbury Hills.
That is awesome. And I know we've kind of worked together, with some other couples and stuff that you've worked with and stuff too. And it's always exciting for me to work with a therapist, like especially with relationships, right? And there's so much physiology in the brain that goes into relationships, and then there's also the whole behavioral side and how we've learned from our own parents, how we learn from different things growing up and stuff too. So we've got the behavior side and the physiology side both going into that. And so many times I tell people that the physiology differences, how we process things, can like attract people early on.
Yep.
Right. And then you want to kill each other later on because of those physiology differences too. And a lot of it's because the physiology is different. So if someone has a little bit of anxiety, someone has a little bit of attention deficit, but then that continues through life and gets worse and worse, the extreme of anything becomes a problem, right? Here, this was kind of attractive a little bit. You can process things different. And here, I want to kill you, right? And part of that, and what I love, working with you on some of these couples too, is to just do a quick brain map and understand objectively what's going on in each other's brains. Because it kind of gets rid of well, he does this and she does this and all the processing of everything. It's more like, okay, here's how her brain works different. Here's how his brain works different. And it's very objective, and we can start to see why there might be some conflict in certain situations, why there might be, some issues in areas. So you want to speak kind of about that?
Yeah, kind of what we call it depersonalizing the conflict. And it is with couples so often just these innate personality difference or physiology differences or family of origin differences. We begin to like not see them as just differences, and we see it as personal. You're intending to hurt me in the worst way possible. Exactly. So we personalize it. Right. So a lot of what we do in couples therapy, one of the first things we do is we start depersonalizing just some of these innate differences between people.
That's absolutely perfect. I think that's probably why a brain map works good in that, because again, you're looking at, oh, that's why he does this. He doesn't do that to push my buttons, right, on purpose. And she doesn't do that just to do that too. So, and then, also there's, we talked about how the physiology changes, but then the behaviors start changing and getting worse and worse. And so many times we're trying to address the behaviors without addressing the physiology in the brain that might be reinforcing those behaviors, right? On that. So, and that becomes an issue.
Absolutely, because I think with couples, all couples will develop kind of, we call it a negative interaction pattern, but it's like a default fighting, how they have tension, how they fight. And the truth is, it's actually pretty much the same pattern for almost all the fights. It's just the content, what they're fighting about is different. Right. But each person's kind of dance move tends to stay the same. And the key is if you can get people, we talk about having your prefrontal cortex on, but so if you can have someone self-regulate their emotions, they're able to see when they're getting sucked into the pattern. It's like a black hole type gravitational force for most of us. But if you can keep your prefrontal cortex on rather than flipping your lid and going into the stress response, if you can just stay present, you can make conscious choices to do something different. And so one of the things we struggle with in couples therapy is that if you go from 0 to 100 because you get triggered, you just fall into that old, very negative pattern. And you just go down, down, down this very negative spiral. And you bring your partner with you because you both get triggered and before you know it. And I always say, I just need one of you. One of you to just throw a life ring to the other to pull them out. Because it's funny when you can get both people to self-regulate. Almost then they can sit down and usually just talk through it. But that self-regulation piece is the hard piece. And I think that's where neurofeedback is really helpful.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny you say that, like in the, throw a life preserver to the other person and stuff, because I talk to so many couples about, majority of marriages today are two people barely surviving themselves, right? Because a lot of it is, I have so much anxiety and stress myself that now your problem is drowning me.
Yep.
My problem is drowning you. And marriages end up being like two people drowning in an ocean trying to save each other.
Yep.
If you grab onto me, you're just bringing me down. I grab onto you, you're bringing down. Where, when you have some reserve, and that emotional regulation, I think, is the reserve, right?
Yeah, exactly.
On it, that then if my wife does something or has a bad day or a horrible situation, I have enough reserve to sit there and be like, I get it. I get why you're in that mood. I totally get it. You just go take a hot bath, just relax. I got the kids, I got this, I can do it. If I have a bad day, she can do that. And then if you have a situation like that and a relationship like that, why would you ever not want to be in that situation? Because two people become 10 times more secure than even one, right? Where when you're both just trying to survive, now she's bringing me down, I'm bringing her down, and it's almost feels like it should be, I'll be better off by myself than two people in that same situation.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so there really is this kind of triggering each other.
Right.
And you just go down this negative spiral, and it's usually the same dance moves. One person's, pursuing someone, the other person shutting them out, and they just go down together. And so it's that ability to self-regulate. And most people want to.
Yes.
Most of my couples want to, and they all say, I don't know why I lose it, right? And so I think that's where the neurofeedback is so magical in terms of making it easier to self-regulate. Because most of us, if we are in kind of a neural integrated state, we make good choices, we can have empathy for our partner. But once you're triggered, you can't have empathy. It's out the window. And the other thing that happens with couples when they're really triggered and kind of in their, flipped out, the stress response is running, things come out of your mouth that you don't mean.
Right.
And I like to use Dan Siegel's, a handy model of the brain, prefrontal cortex, limbic system. It is like a lizard. Some people call it the lizard brain. That's, neurologically not correct, but metaphorically it's good.
Right, exactly.
And what happens is I always say, this lizard begins to have power over what you're saying, and you say horrible things you really don't mean.
Right.
Because the limbic system is not really who we are.
Right.
It's all up here in the prefrontal cortex. But these words that are spoken, when you're dysregulated and you've kind of lost your self-regulation, those words do so much damage, and it is so hard to repair.
Yes.
And so one of the other things that I think is so powerful about increasing a person's ability to self-regulate is you don't do all this needless damage, because they don't remember. They didn't mean what they said, but it came out, and their partner remembers it forever.
Exactly.
And it's very hard to undo that type of damage.
And I'm sure you see this in couples therapies too, but usually if someone has a lot of dysregulation, not only is that difficult in a relationship, but that comes through with kids.
Oh yeah.
Right? When the kids are acting up and then we yell at them and we say something mean, again, that kid heard that and stuff, and how they respond to that. It's really kind of our whole life and all the people closest to us.
Yeah.
They end up hitting that. So.
Yeah, and it does so much damage. It's so hard to repair.
Yeah.
And the truth is 99% of the time, the person didn't actually mean it. They just wanted a weapon in the moment, and they went for what they knew would hurt the most. And it fascinates me how we all kind of cling to that horrible thing that was said, and it plays, in your darkest moments, it plays back in your head.
Right. No, exactly. That whole limbic system, prefrontal, I always give the analogy of someone that if I'm driving down the freeway and someone cuts me off, the limbic system is that voice in my head that says, I should ram my car into that idiot, right? They deserve it. Because it feels like they did it to me. It's justice for me to do it to them. But then the cortex, the prefrontal cortex kicks in and says, no. There's consequences to that. Yeah. And you really don't want to kill someone just because they barely cut you off on the freeway. That's a little bit overreacting, right? Yeah. But if that doesn't kick in, it feels like I should do it to them. I should do 2 times worse than they did to me, right? And and that's that more animal kind of response, that we can get sometimes when we, we don't have the right regulation between that limbic system and that prefrontal cortex. We want to stay in control, and it feels horrible to be in the limbic system being out of control. Right? So that's perfect. I love it. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking about this. I think, Valentine's, month is kind of a great time to kind of talk about the relational side and stuff. And, there's nothing better than when you have two people well regulated in a committed relationship.
Mhm.
It can feel so strong, so secure in that.
Mhm.
But then you can have complete opposite of that
Yes.
if they're not regulated. And it can
Mhm.
feel like the worst trap. I'm just trapped in this, right?
Yeah.
Versus, feeling the security of a good relationship. So I
Yeah,
think it's important to talk about. Well,
absolutely.
thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.